food is up 50%. If you look at, eggs and beef and um, insurance, home prices are up over 50% in the last 4 years. So, I mean, what are you talking about? We need price, Kerry, like I said, we need prices in this country to gradually fall. Deflation is good and healthy.
The Financial Survival Network. Now more than ever. The Financial Survival Network.
And welcome. You are listening to and watching the Financial Survival Network. I'm your host, Kerry Lutz. It's election day. Michael Pento's on, and you're really lucky, you people who are tuned in right now, because you're listening to the only two people left in America who care about little things like deficits. And Michael, like elections, it said when you elect a new government, you just change the face of government. You don't really change anything. Is this time going to be different?
I think it's going to be different because the bond market's not going to tolerate this anymore. If you look like what happened in the UK, and it's happened here in the past too, in the 70s and early 80s, even though we are the world's reserve currency, and supposedly that means that investors internationally have insatiable desires for our bond. They just buy it no matter what. But I seem to remember that I think the 10-year note hit 15%. Okay, 15% in the early 80s. Didn't we have a very liquid bond market back then? Didn't we have the world's reserve currency back then? So, I mean, look, bond yields are concerned about three things that are happening, which is sort of new now. We have an inflation problem in this country that Jerome Powell just doesn't want to deal with because he doesn't want to pay $1 trillion in interest payments on the debt. That's why he cut interest rates by 50 basis points. I don't know if I had an opportunity to tell you that on your program. But you think about, well, why did you cut 50? Jerome, if inflation is way above your target and it's been above your target for 43 stinking freaking months, you don't want to get below your target before you start cutting rates? Shouldn't you be raising rates? He cut by 50 basis points, not because we have very high unemployment. An unemployment rate at 4.1% is still way below the long-term average of 5.7. Isn't because the stock market's really cheap and crashed. It's the most expensive stock market. The stock market, by the way, Kerry, is trading at 3 times sales. That's never happened before. It's incredibly expensive, 200% of GDP. So Jerome's cutting interest rates because he doesn't care about inflation. He doesn't care about the middle class. He cares about the solvency or the ostensibility of the solvency of the United States Treasury. So that's why he cut rates. So we have inflation that he can't deal with. We've got illiquidity, right? We have illiquidity now in the bond market. The reverse repo facility, which is where all this money that was created by the Fed and went into excess reserves and that was parked at the Fed earning a nice fat interest rate, it was $2.5 trillion 2 years ago. Now it's $150 billion. So your liquidity in the reverse repo facility is gone. So now all you have is the Treasury general account, and that's not going to last long. That'll be exhausted in early 2025. And then you have illiquidity in the bond market. So illiquidity, inflation, and insolvency. Those three things are very bad, and that's going to put a check on no matter who no matter who wins the White House and no matter who controls Congress. If they are going to put forth their massive spending programs for either party, Trump has more growth, but still a lot of deficits. Nobody wants to touch entitlements, Kerry. No one's talking about Social Security.
Can't do that.
No one's talking about that. So if they get passed, and if Kamala Harris wants to buy everybody a house, and I don't know the result of the election, and neither do you, but I'm hoping that we have some bastion of sanity in DC where they just say, hey, listen, the bond market is going to revolt. Interest rates are going to spike like they did in 87, and we're going to have an absolute meltdown no matter what's going on in the economy if interest rates become unglued.
Yeah, well, we know things are not all peachy. I mean, it's amazing. I was talking to a friend who I used to think was fairly intelligent. He is intelligent, to be fair. But he says, what's wrong with the country? My portfolio has doubled. And I said, that is what's wrong with the country. The portfolio has doubled, right?
And when did it double? In what time frame? Over what
Over the
last?
past 18 months, I'd imagine, right? 18 months,
Yeah,
two
well, that's
years.
after he lost half of his money in COVID, and
Yeah.
it depends on what. But yeah, but the problem with the problem with the country is twofold: massive amount of debt and asset bubbles, and then you can lay most of that at the feet of the Federal Reserve. But something I find even more interesting is, and by the way, we're not short here at Pento Portfolio Strategies. We're long and strong this market right now, but we have a hair trigger finger on when we could change that allocation. Because,
Mm.
like I said before, the bond market is going to be key here. And I warned about it in 2013. I said, don't have to worry about it now. I said, but in the next few years, next couple of decades, we are going to have a massive disruption in the bond market because the Fed is going to have to choke off. The Fed is going to create inflation, and then they're going to have to choke it off. And if they don't have the willingness to fight it by raising interest rates, which is in de facto a blow up of the bond market, the Fed took interest rates from 0 to 5.5. And if they don't have the temerity to, I don't know if that's the right word, but if they don't have the courage,
Yeah, the
not
fortitude.
fortitude, thank you, to actually raise rates, keep them there long enough to kill inflation. And I don't mean make inflation go up more slowly. And I don't want prices to rise less quickly than they were before. No, you need prices down. The price level of things has to fall. And if you doubt that, just look at your insurance bill, your car payment,
Mhm.
and your home price, and your equity prices. They have to fall. Otherwise, they're unsustainable, dangerous, and are in danger of absolutely collapsing, which we don't want to happen. We'd rather have a gradual air let out of this bubble. But do you see that? Do you see any willingness to actually deal with our actual problems? No.
I haven't heard it mentioned once during this entire election, other than putting Elon Musk in charge of the Government Efficiency Commission, which government and efficiency are repellent to one another.
It's an oxymoron.
Yeah.
It's an
Yeah.
oxymoron. Kerry, I've been in this business for 30, almost 34 years now.
Mhm.
And I never thought I would say this, but our data now looks more like China. I mean, we're just making stuff up now. Look at the non-farm payroll reports that are coming out.
I believe everything. Michael, I believe everything. You don't think your government would lie to you, do you?
If you we learned in the last few years, I've known it all along, but you've known it
Of
too,
course.
I'm sure. But the media had this very thin veil of objectivity. But that's been ripped off. I mean, if you doubt that, just look at the late night comedians. ABC has a signature program called the Jimmy Kimmel. I mean, this is not funny. This is not
Nonstop Trump jokes.
objectivity. They
Yeah.
don't. It's just they're just stumping for Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
And over in CBS is not any different. So, and this is, don't you think that the executives at ABC, CBS, NBC understand that when they put Kamala Harris in a giggling fest on Saturday Night Live, 2 days before the election, that they're trying to corrupt and skew the vote?
Had the opposite had the opposite of the intended effect. It's all just a Hollywood script that we're living here, and Hollywood only pays for happy endings. They don't pay for depressing, bad, tragic endings. It's rare to ever see a movie that ends unhappily, and that's what the government's doing. They're just paying for happy endings.
Well, the government's also, unfortunately, like I said, looking more like China. So let's just take the non-farm payroll report. And I'm not even talking about the 881,000 jobs after revisions. Then they said, oh, by the way, we overcounted. Oh, they
They
always
didn't exist.
overcount,
Are you
right?
sure they didn't
They
exist?
overcount.
Where did they go?
I don't know. We just added the birth death model was a little skewed. But then the last report, right? This last report, of course, which, oh, it was just hurricane. There's hurricane storms. So don't even look at it, Kerry. But wait a second. Look at the revisions. The August revision was 81,000 jobs less than what they originally reported. Well, 81,000 is more than 50%. They're off by more than 50% on their initial guess. So when we have a Federal Reserve that controls the price of money based on information that comes in arrears, that's completely faulty. Doesn't that bother anybody? I mean, we're in a big mess. The middle class of this country has been eviscerated, hanging by a thread. We have top 20%, the top quintile of the inhabitants of this nation are running everything. And they're keeping the economy afloat because their house prices are bubblicious territory, and along with their 401k plans. And when that goes, we're not going to have just a collapse. We're going to have chaos in the streets. I'm afraid. I pray that doesn't happen, but you can't have a healthy country without a healthy and vibrant middle class. You just can't have it.
Yeah, can't. Not in a modern economy, that's for sure, where everything hinges on demand. Michael, like these guys, like Trump is running on, he's going to bring the price of stuff down, but he's also running on, I'm going to lower interest rates. And my question is, like, how do you do this? You cut the government? Like, I don't know if the last time you were on, I told you I did this exercise with Chat GPT, and I said, I want to balance the budget. How do I do it? And the first thing it says is increase taxes by 50%. And then I had to tell that stupid thing, look, I want to do it without raising taxes. Give me a list of 100 agencies we can get rid of that no one will notice. And Michael, there were agencies in there that I don't know where they came from. I don't know what they do. The only valid agency in the bunch was the Department of Redundancy Department, you know, and ChatGPT just didn't want to get rid of that one.
Well, even if you got rid of those 100 agencies, they probably have no money in there. What do you, if you can't solve Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, and the interest on the debt, and you don't want to touch defense, I don't care if you cut every other program. You haven't solved any problem. That's where all the money is being spent right now. And it's going to get a lot worse. We're going to have we're going to have at a minimum a $60 trillion deficit by 2050. $60 trillion.
Mm-hmm.
And that's if we don't have a recession and if interest rates don't go up and if inflation is not a problem. I mean, I'll bet you anything in the world we'll have a recession by 2050.
Yeah.
I bet you anything, any amount of money you want to.
Well, one thing, if they ban sugar and nicotine and carbohydrates, there should just be a law against carbohydrates. That would get rid of our Medicare problem and all of our health problems. But then the problem would be that people would be living too damn long, and everyone would be living to 100 or 90, and they'd be collecting Social Security. So that doesn't really solve the problem, does it?
Not all. I can tell you as anecdotally, we have one of the most dangerous food supplies on the
Poison.
planet.
Poison.
I came back from Italy not too long ago, and we ate out breakfast, lunch, and dinner every day for like 10 days, and came back at the same weight.
Yeah.
And I have one dinner here, and I gained 3 pounds.
We get pasta for breakfast.
Kerry, I'm going to ask you, who is the largest contributory to the Food and Drug Administration?
It's Big Pharma, right? I mean, they paid billions of dollars in bonuses to the employees to approve these bad drugs.
Isn't that like, so I make my money when people get sick, and I'm going to contribute the biggest, like 75% or something to the budget of the FDA from the pharmaceutical industry. Does that bother anybody? Is that counterintuitive?
their purpose isn't to find a cure, it's to find a long-term treatment that makes you dependent. Like, somebody likened it the other day. They were telling me, like, dating sites don't really want you to find people, and they're designed so you don't find people. Dating sites are designed so you keep paying your subscription fees. And it's the drug industry. It's a model for American industry. The food industry, they don't want you healthy. They want you eating more and more of this stuff. And that's why it's all designed in food kitchens. So it hacks your brain, it biohacks your brain, and the economy is no different. They just want you spending, spending, spending without any regard to financial solvency or anything else. It's all rigged.
Yeah, and now the zeitgeist of today is, how you grow an economy is by how much your government wants to stimulate. But as if the government had plenary control of the economy and they could just, like, if they want to be nice, they'll just stimulate, borrow a bunch of money and give it to you. And how much the economy grows is just predicated on how much they want to borrow and spend. I mean, when did that become a formula for success in a capitalist economy? They even China is completely communist. I get that, but people are saying, well, even you hear on our American media, if only the communists, the PBOC, and Beijing will just agree to stimulate a little more. That's all they need, just to stimulate.
That worked real good last time. It reminds me of a Saturday Night Live skit back when Saturday Night Live was actually really funny, and we used to race home to see it because we didn't have DVRs. Jimmy Carter was talking about inflation, and his plan was, I'm going to use inflation to make everybody in the country a millionaire. That's how I'm going to solve the problem. And sure enough, Jerome Powell and the current leaders, and Trump as well, that's their plan. They're going to make everyone a millionaire, Michael. And basically, home prices, we're already halfway there for a lot of the country.
Yeah, being a millionaire used to mean something. It doesn't mean anything anymore because everybody is a millionaire. Well, I say everybody. That it's a bifurcated country. So you have, there was one of the founding fathers of Bloomberg was talking about how wonderful inflation is because inflation is now back. Prices are now back down to where they were, and before COVID, and that wages have kept pace with inflation. What wages? Like what? Average wages have kept up with CPI. Average wages. That's assuming everybody gets the same. That gets that average. But if you're on a fixed income, tell me how your wages have kept up with inflation, right? If you don't have a job, tell me how your wages have kept up with inflation. And that, again, those wages are all skewed to the top 20%. And those wages have kept up with CPI. Is CPI an accurate measurement of what really has occurred with prices? No. I mean, food is up 50%. If you look at eggs and beef and insurance, home prices are up over 50% in the last 4 years. So, I mean, what are you talking about? We need prices, Kerry, like I said, we need prices in this country to gradually fall. Deflation is good and healthy. Because what you're going to do, if you can't get that to happen, if Jerome Powell is going to say, I am telling you that inflation above 2%, which it still is, and it's been that way for 43 months. If inflation is above 2%, I need to start cutting rates aggressively to try to keep inflation from falling any further. That's telling investors in our fixed income spectrum that since our central bank no longer cares about inflation, we need to start caring about inflation a whole lot more. And they are. Here's a fact. Mortgage rates have gone up significantly. They were just about like from 6.1% to 7.5% since Powell cut interest rates to bring interest rates down. Now,
what's that about?
the benchmark 10-year Treasury, that's mostly pegged to what mortgage rates are going to do and what your going to be. Now, if your auto is more expensive and your house is more expensive, tell me. Tell me how Powell is making things better
Good
by
question.
cutting interest. No, what you've done is you've said to investors you no longer care about inflation. So we have to start too.
It's madness. It's madness. Uh, you know, one thing that I thought we were at this point that we're at now in the 90s. Then the internet came along and there was a productivity boom globally that brought down prices around the world. To think that government will stop spending and that somehow that's going to save us here, that you know as well as I know, and that just ain't going to happen until they have to, right?
Yeah, they'll stop spending. They'll reset the currency. They will default explicitly on debt after we suffer a long and protracted battle with hyperinflation. We're no longer near that. We're not near that at all right now.
What about AI?
We will, I think we will eventually have that battle. And
Yeah.
then when the people wake up and they stop watching you know network television to get their news.
They are pretty well doing that. You know that, man. It's network news is like nobody trust it, right? The least trusted name in news, CNN, the Cemetery News Network, right?
That's why people are flocking to outlets like yours to get real, honest information and real, honest interpretation of that medicine, of that information.
Yeah. Joe Rogan.
But when the people say, "Wait a second, why is the purchasing power of my currency cratering? What is causing that? What does it mean when a Fed's balance sheet goes from a few $100 billion to 9 trillion? What does it mean when Janet Yellen, the Treasury Secretary, whoever at the time, sends another round of helicopter money, just checks in the mail? What does that really mean? Where does the money come from? What is backing my currency? Those are the questions that we stopped asking. I mean, I used to ask them all the time when I was on CNBC, and I've been thrown off the channel. I mean, what is wrong? I used to debate Steve Leisman about this all the time. What is wrong? We got to a discussion about the increase in the money supply, and it's like, well, you need the Fed. How would you target the money supply? I said, why don't you peg it towards something like gold? The mine supply increase in gold is commensurate with
2% a year.
Yeah, it's about 2% a year. I think that's what you said.
I think it's gone down a bit, but
one and a half,
historically,
2%.
yeah.
So 1.5%, let's just say 1.5, 2% per year, which is commensurate with population growth plus productivity growth, long-term averages. You can't have these bubbles. Why don't we just pick what? Oh, we need the elasticity in our currency. Well, Kerry, do you need elasticity to the point where you're printing trillions upon trillions of dollars in a matter of months? Is that the elasticity? Is that what you want?
I need elasticity in my waistband, but if it's too elastic, those pants are going to fall down on me.
Oh no, we don't want that to happen, right?
No, we don't want that.
No.
It's just insane.
When the American public has an epiphany and they say, okay, I understand why our founding fathers said Article 1, Section 10 of our Constitution that only gold or silver should be considered money. You just can't print it willy-nilly, not a state and not the federal government, certainly not the federal government. When money becomes real, we'll stop all this madness. We'll stop the endless wars. We'll stop the asset bubbles. We'll heal the middle class. We'll stop the bifurcation of the country between the haves and have-nots. Stable prices, stable interest rates,
Declining prices.
stable currency.
Declining prices.
Declining prices. And that's a natural byproduct of productivity. If I can produce more Ford cars off the assembly line for less money, I could charge you less, but I make up for it in volume. My margins might might stay the same or shrink a little, but the volume will be explosive. Everybody wins,
Yeah.
and you hire a lot of people. That's how you grow. You grow economy through, here's a word for you, productivity.
And savings.
Real,
Savings.
honest innovation. You do not grow an economy by praying and obsequiously supplicating to a government to stimulate. They have nothing. The government has nothing but a printing press.
They take.
They take. They take from you, they take from the private sector, and they create inflation. Government is a productivity killing machine and an inflation producing machine. That is all they can do. Please remember that when you ask for, well, why don't they just stimulate? We need some deficit spending. That's what I hear. Well,
That's all we have.
I think we tried that. We have that, and now we are on the precipice of a bond market collapse, and that's going to wake a lot of people up.
Yes, for sure. Well, what wakes people up? Things like Peanut the squirrel, stormtroopers charging into a guy's house and then killing his pet squirrel and his pet raccoon, because everything else you're talking about, most of the people weren't alive, Michael, for the last round of inflation in the 70s and 80s and late 60s, like you and I were. But when the government comes in and you're minding your own business and they 10 people armed to go get a squirrel that's a real threat to humanity, people start to, the veil is coming off,
I think it might even be an election event because listen. Why didn't they just let Rocky the squirrel go?
Yeah.
I mean, I mean, what are you? I live in Florida, and if you look the wrong way at a fish, I mean, you could go to jail here. I mean, I think they shot did they shoot the squirrel?
Yeah, they didn't shoot it, but they euthanized it. In other words, they killed it. And the raccoon, both of them. The raccoon was just a bystander.
How did they kill it? They give it an illegal
I guess
injection?
they needled it. Yeah, put it down.
But why couldn't they just let the thing go?
Because it supposedly bit somebody, and the raccoon was a witness. I don't know. They had to erase all
The witnesses?
evidence.
The witnesses had to be.
Like the mob. Can't let a witness survive.
I don't know why it's illegal to have I mean, is a rodent? I mean, rabbits are rodents. I don't know. I don't want. I'm sure our audience doesn't want to hear it. But the thing is that why we have to fetter the control of government, and the number one thing we need to do is the government they have usurped the authority of markets. They've taken it away, and they control everything. And that's why we are obsessive compulsive about every Fed meeting and parse their words like we're reading scripture.
Yeah.
Because they control everything. The Fed can destroy this economy, or they can create some kind of, stagflationary boom.
So true.
Prices. It's up to them. And we should never have relegated that power to just, 12 voting members and they're unelected people.
Yeah.
But educate yourself, people.
That's it. All right. Well, Michael, always insightful, always a pleasure learning from you. Pentoport.com is the site to go to where you'll find Michael's extensive work, podcasts, interviews, everything else. And if you got a question for Michael, myself, shoot me an email, kl@kerrylutz.com. And you'll find a link to Michael's site on the show notes to this interview on financialsurvivalnetwork.com. Sign up for your free newsletter. Michael, we'll talk to you again in a month or two and see how things are transgressing.
Blessings to you, Kerry. Thank you.